All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing time so far. Our next speaker is Venu Vasudevan. He is a Senior Director, Data Science and AI at Procter & Gamble. Please join me in welcoming Venu to our virtual stage.
Thank you, Patricia, and welcome everyone. Let me get some of the preliminaries out of the way here, but in the next 20 or so minutes, I want to share with you a perspective on how AI has and will impact how we invent and distribute and delight consumers with products they use on a daily basis. If you look at the long arc of AI, software, AI being just another form of software over the last 25 years, it's interesting to note that it started with how these technologies transformed commerce and then went on to transform and redefine search and mobile and television. And now we're coming back to the age where AI is revisiting physical industries, science, and retail as well on a more holistic basis. So some of what I'll share will be this sort of AI 2.0 in retail and what it means from a P&G, from the perch in P&G that I sit in. So a little bit about myself. I spent much of my career, mix of startups and large companies in the digital spaces that have already been transformed by AI. And over the last 4 years, I lead the data science practice at Procter & Gamble. As a company, you're probably quite familiar with us from the 170 or so brands that cater to 4 billion consumers on the chemistry side. But increasingly, our products are AI infused, either through companion sort of applications and things like mobile and chatbots that are companions to the chemistry that enable you to use the chemistry to optimize the outcomes you want to get to, but also a growing portfolio of smart and connected products that are AI infused. From the get-go, things like smart toothbrushes that will be IO, some skin-based diagnostics, and smart skin pigmentation products I'll allude to as we move forward. Now, P&G uses AI across the spectrum, everywhere from conception to the retail shelf. But if you were to simplify this model from the point of view of what AI brings to the table, you can think of kind of the right-handed, how do you build the product right, kind of post-launch marketing and retail science that enables you to advertise it, communicate it, be on the right shelf at the right point in time, and help the consumer make a decision. That is largely the land of big data, which I think a number of us are familiar with in the audience. But there's the other side as well, which is build the right product, which is how do you best decode what the consumer needs, how they're using the current products, what are the pain points in their life that drive new products and new variants of products that will continue to delight them and elevate the level of consumer value we bring. And that is the land of untidy data, because you're stepping into the unknown of what you're filling a white space that represents the consumer need. So my talk will be overweighted towards the left. So think of it as an 80-20, but I'll cover a little bit of each. So when you break down what can AI do to build the right product, we think of it that in sort of 3 innovation pillars. One is the mix of chemistry and digital. How do you produce chemistry at scale and in a way that's cost effective, let's say skin creams, but so that you can offer it to 4 billion people at the right price, while at the same time creating a digital experience that coaches each individual to her or his particular desired outcome. So chemistry at scale, digital for the person. AI-accelerated science, up to the top left, is about how do you innovate in science at the speed of the internet. And with last year, we've seen companies like Moderna redefine how biology is explored. But how do you get to look at a whole bunch of alternatives that the consumer might like at the speed of the internet, and then neck down where the signal is strong, you neck down to classical science to better understand and instrument the product. And finally, on the bottom, the third pillar is how do you bridge the say-do gap that manifests itself in consumer insights, which is consumers often say they do something different than what they actually do, and it's particularly true in daily touch products where they're not necessarily self-aware of what they're doing while they're doing it. If this was an interactive session, I would ask all of you, how long do you think you brush your teeth on average? And typically there's a say-do gap there between most people saying 2 minutes, because there's a subliminal understanding that dentists want your favorite dentist wants you to brush for 2 minutes. But that most of us spend about 47 seconds brushing. And that, if you think of the efficacy of the chemistry, and how it would play in 47 seconds versus 2 minutes, that's a fairly significant gap. And it's sort of one example of the kinds of say-do gaps we want to better understand, so we can create products that match with the real lives of consumers, or nudge them towards a different behavior that is more optimal for them. So just walking into each of those three pillars at one more level, in the space of understanding consumers and bridging the say-do gap, there's a couple of spaces. One is, how do you understand a lot of conversations that are happening in social media? And I think we've seen a number of innovations here on taking the conversations on Twitter and Reddit and Amazon and so on, and understanding at a very high level what is the consumer sentiment about product. But some of the things we're looking at is taking that one level above to really decode business specific product metrics, to understand the enlightened minority that talks about unmet needs and uses of our products that we may or may not have anticipated, even going down to the ingredient level to understand how what people's sentiment or thought process globally, kind of segmented at a granular level, is about specific ingredients. And ultimately, for us, this is a two-way. You want to decode those messages in a way that you can play it back in terms of brand communication or products that are improved based on that understanding. I talked earlier about the say-do gap in your daily brushing habits. So picking on that, we see video as a way to observe what people do instead of asking them what they do. So everything from how long do you brush your teeth? Do you really brush it in all your all 18 zones in your mouth as dentists think about it, or do you favor some? Do you exhibit minority behaviors which actually are not as rare as you think, which is, do you move your head or do you move the brush when you're brushing your teeth? If you're a mom and you're changing the diapers, can we look at the 14 micro actions that constitute a diaper change and identify the ones that are not the ones that are endemically hard, because certain things are just hard when you're sleep deprived, but things where some moms do it better than others, as kind of a coaching moment or a product improvement moment. So those are all things where video is a ground signal, and the combination of video and AI, we believe, and in many cases we have data points to say that that combination is very effective in understanding not just consumers en masse, but really understanding at a granular level sort of micro segments that use these things in a variety of different ways to eventually drive product differentiation and consumer delight. Finally, we talked about the whole notion of AI-accelerated science, which was how do you explore at the speed of the internet? And that's a very broad space, and I'll take a couple of data points in there. One is around how do you invent new material science, and not so much material science, but physical products. Let's just take diapers. How do you go through the large number of design alternatives at the speed of market? And I'll double click on that in a little bit. Another area is, how do you, if you're testing physical world products, how do you go from today's speed of testing, which is at the speed at which you can bring foot traffic into your company's lab, versus turning every home into a lab, and essentially you innovate and explore at the speed of YouTube, not at the speed of foot traffic. Again, I will give you an example of a proof point here that makes us think this idea is a real possibility. Okay, so we talked about the three pillars that we through which the three lenses through which we look at consumer insights. let me give you an example in each so you have a taste of what AI-driven innovation looks like in these spaces. The first is personalization. I think most of us, or users of Netflix and Amazon, are very familiar with recommender systems there that tell you what product to buy or what movie to watch. Those tend to be point in time kinds of experiences. In a lot of our products, people aren't looking for, I mean, you're not looking so much for the miracle at the moment, but for help to select the right product and sustain its usage over time so that you get better skin or whatever consumer goal you want to achieve. At the same time, if you take skin cream as an example, here the product portfolio in this space is complicated, and many women don't know what's the right product for them or what exactly their issue is. So you could imagine, and if you can download this application if you're an Olay skin cream user. You can download Olay Skin Advisor, where you can understand a consumer's come from state by acquiring an image of their face. You can do an analysis to better understand the come from state, a questionnaire to understand the destination or goal you want to achieve, and AI to really help you go from point A to point B. And the AI on step 4, looks a little bit like a more a variation extension of what you see in a lot of recommender systems. But what's interesting in a consumer grade technology is even on the first step of taking a picture, when you have to create innovations that can deal with the natural variations in how consumers interpret your request to provide an image, and really help consumers through AI understand all these confounding situations that will not provide the inputs and then the right sort of optics to allow you to build an effective recommender system. So in some sense, in consumer technologies, easy is hard. Making something as easy as possible for the consumer requires AI to infuse not only the output, but also the input, so that AI-based smart selfies allow you to take a quick selfie that is nevertheless useful. The other complexity is, real life is complicated. So if you take a consumer skin, the optics of skin behind on your forehead where there's bone behind it, as opposed to on your cheeks where there's soft tissue, are quite different. So the AI, part of the challenge is to make sure that you're converting the optics to a really credible recommendation to the end user, and that requires the kind of sophistication that's shown here, where you have a combination of experts that take you from your current situation to a recommended outcome. So again, the message here is simple is hard, and when we're building AI to support daily touch products, it has to work for a variety of consumers in situations that are natural to them, which means the technology has to adjust to the real world. Moving on to AI accelerated science, I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what that concretely means in the spaces of design and I would say creating scalable panels at the speed at which internet companies do, for example. So first, design. I think in a lot of our markets, and this is true probably of a number of people in the audience, is you're seeing the rate at which new products are introduced, getting a lot faster with compressed market windows. But you're equally also seeing people's purchase intent becoming not just about performance, but becoming multidimensional and becoming more complicated. So if you take diapers as an example, people used to buy it based on absorbency or how often you have to change the diapers. But a Chinese mom who has a couple of grandparents at home, absorbency is one criterion she cares about. She cares about the premium look and feel, how comfortable it might feel from her estimation on her baby. So you're going from criteria that are objective and can be tested to things that are subjective that we nevertheless have to decode and build toward to delight the consumer. So certainly virtual prototyping techniques over the last couple of decades have come a long way, and enabling you on the performance side to create prototypes fairly rapidly from what used to be weeks to what are days. But can you create prototypes to put in front of consumers in a matter of a day, to cater to 10, 20, 30 different subjective vectors that are visual, that might drive purchase decisions. And the good news is, the other point here is, unlike a lot of sort of AI challenges you see on the internet, where large amounts of data is available that can be obtained from the internet, in a number of our problems, the number of data sets is small. For example, the number of potential sample designs that AI can test on is small. The other is the what's called the hedonic. So what's called the hedonic region is small. In other words, very small design changes can make a diaper go from being desirable to being somewhat quirky. So can we really design to that small design space? Turns out that I think there's real potential here, and I think you've seen technologies called GANs that became infamous very early because they were the technology behind deepfakes. And deepfakes is a space which is on the one hand terrifying, on the other hand really shows the creativity of AI. But to apply it to industries such as ours, which have tight design constraints, I think part of the innovation is getting that mix of letting AI explore, but giving it guardrails, such as what's your brand message, what's the product, what's the tiering message, how to stay within the tier structure, as AI explores designs. I won't talk a lot about this jargon, but just want to sort of point out that a lot of the innovation here is taking the core technologies that a lot of internet companies create and really adding those guardrails and the ability to work with fairly small sample set and still be able to produce designs that help designers, that amplify the productivity of designers to really have a conversation through consumer insights with eventual consumers. So I would say I think these techniques around GANs and AI, I think, hold real promise in a number of our domains where we are innovating to a narrow but still very concrete and extremely challenging subjective vocabulary by which our consumers are beginning to make purchase decisions. The second area in AI-accelerated science, I want to touch on is the whole space of physical world panels, where people who build physical world products, let's say mops, bringing people into the lab to test either kinematically, how do they mechanically use it, what's the level of comfort, what's the level of wear and tear on the device, the variations and themes in styles of usage. And the issue with in-person panels is that they take time to set up. You don't necessarily observe the consumer in a real world setting. The company's lab is not necessarily the real world setting, but that said, you're able to get a full sensorial view of what the consumer does for a small sample size. The alternative would have been, can we build panels at the speed of YouTube? Can we just put out a call to action in YouTube and people send you, videos of them mopping? The good news there is you can observe people in a natural setting. Every home is a lab, but it doesn't yield the in-use metrics that would allow you to, improve your product, target it to, new microsegments you might discover. But AI is beginning to show that it may be able to bridge the gap and give you the best of both worlds. So here's an example of some early work. And what AI is able to do is take a video of somebody, let's say mopping, and so it's looking at it in third person, and it can convert it to a first person view of a robot mopping, so that now the robot is instrumented to understand, the speed, the effort, the pressure, etc. And I think as these techniques develop, they can really accelerate the scale and efficacy and speed at which we can do human testing, testing of physical world products, and understand not just broad qualitative levels of understanding of how these products are used, but really understand the microsegments and help design to those microsegments of the consumer population. So hopefully those examples gave you a sense of what are the dialects of AI that are fairly cutting edge and emerging that allow us to solve a complementary set of problems in consumer packaged goods and retail, and most of these travel to a number of other domains where we are trying to accelerate the speed and quality of discovery of new products. And so a lot of our focus has been in understanding the vocabularies that AI needs to be sort of guided to innovate, to see if we can innovate within the real world where data sets are not necessarily easy to create, because data sets actually come from some form of designer imagination and physical invention. And finally, how do we partner with the consumer where they let us in to very private aspects of their life, but we are able to we're able to innovate with that information in privacy preserving and cost-effective ways. Well, thank you for your time. I look forward during the actual session later in August to actually interact with you and be able to answer your questions and engage in discussions on how these ideas and your own ideas apply in other industries. Thank you again.
Wow, Venu, thank you so much. That was amazing. We really appreciate you sharing your insights today. And I know this virtual audience is giving you a huge virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Yes. All right, for the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.